So in the 1990s, the government embarked on one of the most ambitious engineering projects in modern history. The first challenge was to design a bridge that could span the almost 2-mile gap across the Gulf of Corinth. The distance was too great for a single-span bridge, so engineers had to build support towers in water that's over 200 feet deep.
The cross-sections below sea level, we go to deep waters from very beginning of the shore. No matter what type of bridge we want to select, we could not escape the depth of water.
To overcome the water depth issue, Paniotis and his fellow engineers would need to look to history's great engineering innovations for the solution. Building in water has always been a challenge. Early builders relied on conveniently placed rocks for the foundation of their structures. Fine for lighthouses, useless for bridge building. Creating artificial islands was time-consuming and impractical in deep water. In the 19th century, pressurized structures called caissons were developed to create underwater building sites, but they were difficult to build and dangerous. Fortunately, in the 20th century, a new technique was on the horizon. In the 1940s, engineer Guy Monsell came up with a solution that finally conquered the challenge of building at sea. Professor Luke Bisbee is heading far out into the English Channel to see the remains of Guy Monsell's bold creation firsthand.
Monsell's influence in contemporary engineering, I don't think, really can be overstated. This was really the first time that this had ever been attempted, and so it was really quite a daring feat of engineering.
Monsell's innovation was triggered by the Second World War. It became clear the River Thames was a prime target for German bombers during the war. The Germans wanted to destroy London's docks and lay mines to disrupt Allied shipping. So Monsell came up with a radical new design for offshore sea defense. Naval forts consisting of two 80-foot-high concrete towers, each containing 4 floors of accommodations topped with a gun deck. But the ingenious part of Monsell's design wasn't the layout of the fort. It was how it would be constructed and deployed at sea.
Knock John here was towed out 3 to 6 miles from where it was constructed on land, and then it was sunk in place, out exactly where you see it.
Monsell designed the bases of his forts as huge hollow concrete barges. Despite their enormous weight, they had enough buoyancy to float.
Monsell built the forts on top of these large concrete barges and then calculated how large the barges needed to be in order to hold the weight of the fort so they could be taken out and then sunk in place.
The massive 4.5-ton concrete forts were constructed in a dry dock, then towed out to sea with a 100-man crew already on board.
When they had it in the place where they wanted it, they essentially just pulled out a stopcock at one end and let the water flow in. As the water was flowing in, the barge started to list in the water. Eventually, the nose dipped under the water. All 100 men were hanging on as the fort was sinking at 35 degrees.
Despite the rough submersion, Monsell's groundbreaking design worked perfectly.
The bottom of the barge basically filled up with water, and eventually the entire barge sunk to the bottom and flattened out.
Monsell's forts helped British forces shoot down 22 enemy aircraft and 30 flying bombs. They protected London from attack and made engineering history.
The influence of this type of construction you can see in all different facets of engineering today. You can see it in the offshore oil and gas industry with oil platforms. You can see it being used as foundations for wind turbines. And of course, you can see it being used as a way of placing foundations for large bridge structures around the world.
But the most impressive use of Monsel's revolutionary floating concrete design is at the Rian-Antirian Bridge.